Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. He said my name is Justin Zahradka. I am from the northeast corner of North Dakota, so about an hour from Minnesota and an hour from Canada. So when I get bored, you can go up to Canada and have some fun up there. But anyway, so cover crops for cow chow. First, we got to sit here and ask ourselves, why are we here? So, first question is what we are doing working well. Is it working? Are you getting by? Or is it working well? This picture down here on your left-hand side, that was this spring here in North Dakota. It's not a storm cloud, it's a dust cloud. So it's not 1930, but it's 2017, and we still have the same problems that we need to address. So what I like to see is nice green, lush, covered soil with cattle out there. So you got your livestock on top of the ground and below ground. So we're losing less, we're rebuilding soil. So we're all here, we all made that choice. Cover crops and grazing, it's in our minds, but is it out there in our field? So what really connects that? So first you gotta have it up here in your mind, and it's gotta go in your heart, and it's gonna get into your field. And I believe if it's not in your heart, it's not gonna be in your field. And it took me a while to go down the path I'm on, but I know it'll continue on from here. So, and here's what David Montgomery talked about here earlier this morning, and I actually heard him speak a few weeks ago. He was at our state soil conservation meeting, so it was a nice review, I guess, this morning. But you know, these are kind of the principles he outlined. So minimal soil disturbance, cover crops, and diverse crop rotation. So I guess the way I think of this, my favorite hobby is eating. I love to eat food. So I think of this in terms of a square meal per day. Well, you're supposed to eat 3 times per day to have a square meal. And I think animal impact with livestock, I think that's dessert. I think we can really put the icing on the cake and get a better benefit if we introduce animal impact. So why is animal impact so important, and why do people say, it can increase soil building so much quicker? There's a difference between if you're just, cutting a plant with a blade, or if you're having a living creature, whether it's a cow or a sheep or a goat or whatever, moving across it. Cows, when they're out there grazing, they're going to pull, they're going to trample, they're going to tug, and they're going to tear those plants. So what does that mean? Plants have to work harder to repair themselves. When they do that, they do it by pushing more exudates into the soil and therefore pushing more carbon into the soil. So when you do that, obviously you stimulate microbial activity in the soil, and that accelerates the soil building and organic matter. So there we go. So now I'll just introduce my background a little bit. I guess I grew up on a small family farm. My father had a small cow herd. The cropland had been rented out. I went to college and wasn't home to take care of the cow herds. My dad ended up selling the cows, but I was still interested, and then I actually started my own small cow herd when I was in high school. So I started with 1 bred heifer and added crop production to that when I was a junior in high school, so that was back in 2011. And then our county had a cover crop demonstration project they were starting. So I marched into my county extension office, agent's office, and said, I want to be a cooperator in this. And he took a chance, not sure what he thought, but he took the chance, and I ended up part of that demonstration project, which was growing 40 acres of cover crop and tracking the gains cattle had while they were grazing on that. So it worked really good that first year, and that's why I stuck with it, and I'm still using those practices today. So today, I have converted all my acres on my farm to no-till. I raise wheat, corn, field peas, obviously forage crops and cover crops as well. And now I switched kind of from a feeder calf operation to custom grazing and a cow-calf operation. So in my situation as a young farmer, I can't go out there and borrow a ton of money and tie it up in a cow herd. So that's why I'm custom grazing. So I have somebody bring their cows to me. I take care of them for 5 months, graze them, get the nutrients from the cows, and then they come pick them up. So that works pretty good. And I also have my own small cow herd to better utilize the land I'm grazing. So I've grown cover crops for 7 years now. 2011 was the first year I had cover crop. And my goals while doing this have kind of changed. It used to be, increase soil health. Well, what does that mean? Really capturing carbon and while doing that, providing forage for cattle, and bottom line, you gotta keep that positive. So here's the soil profile I guess I'm dealing with. It's kind of a clay loam soil, Barnes abuse loam, and there you see I've got about 8 to 12 inches in that top A horizon. There's somewhat of a B horizon in subsoil. So it's kind of interesting. It's been tracked in our county that, you know, at particular sites we've lost over 15 inches of topsoil. So that's right on line with what we heard this morning, that a third of our soil is gone. So here's what I use, I guess, for planting my cover crops. Nothing fancy. I have a 1981 John Deere 4440 and a 20-foot drill, and it's paid for, so it's cheap for me to get the seeds in the ground. And I don't have GPS or all the fancy technology, but it still works. So with that, I'll get started. So here's the easy button of cover crops, dual cropping after wheat harvest. So this is the same field on the same year after wheat harvest. So what did that look like? Spring wheat seeded April 11th, harvested on July 29th. So 2012, that was a very dry and early year. It's not usually quite that early that far north. But what I did is I just went and broadcasted radishes and turnips into that wheat stubble with a terrogator. And all I did was harrowed it to create that seed to soil contact. And as I finished up harrowing, I lucked out and it started raining. So that was a key driver in this. And cover crops too, when they're getting started, sometimes they don't look like they're really growing that much, but once they get established and get out of the ground and really get going, here you see this is a month after it was planted. So very quick growth once the radishes and turnips get going. Here's another look, September 23rd, 52 days after planting. And let me remind you, I'm in North Dakota, so the average frost date we usually have is September 14th. So very short growing season, although that's average. In the last couple of years, it's been into October. So I guess I kind of just plan for later frost every year now. But anytime you have solar panels like that pasture turnip up there, that is what we need to feed our soil. Here's just another look, and here's what it looks like when I was done grazing. So obviously the surface is covered and we're still getting those benefits. So I guess this all kind of started as an FFA project in high school. So I had my family's cow herd at this time split up into two groups. So I tracked the gain as a cattle grazing cover crop versus the gain on the cattle out there on the native pasture being fed hay, since the pasture was already overgrazed. And long story short, here's what it came down to. So the calves grazing cover crop gained more weight. Steer calves almost 2.5 pounds a day, heifer calves closer to 2 pounds a day. Control group, which was being fed hay, steer calves 1.78 pounds a day, and heifer calves 1.3. You'll notice the heifers and the cows being fed hay, they gained a lot more weight. They just sat there and ate, and I just sat there and kept feeding them. So that's the trade-off you get. Do you want your cows out in your field working for you, putting the nutrients out there, or are you going to start the tractor and spend an hour feeding cows every day? So that was the results there, and the field was covered with white snow during the winter. We had a blizzard here 2 days before I left for this conference, and all the snow in the ditches, I guess we call it spirit now because it's snow and dirt mixed together. It's not a very pretty sight. And this was the spring following that first cover crop that year. It's a lot of earthworms out there. I guess that was the most earthworms I had seen in the field up to that point. So now in 2013, the next year cover crops, this was 35 acres of cover crop that I put on breakout hayland. So it was an alfalfa smooth brome field that had not had any maintenance for the past 20 years, and alfalfa stand to decrease, so needed to kind of rejuvenate that land, you could say. So I broke that field up and planted cover crop into it. You wouldn't have to do tillage, but when there's that many gopher mounds in the field, you have to, just to get it smooth. So that's why you see the bare soil there. Like I mentioned before, once you get the cover crop out there, they establish very quickly. So this had a lot of diversity out there. You can see, well, maybe you can't, but like some of the millet and grasses, they're starting to seed out in that picture, which means if you're going to graze that, the quality will be less for the cattle because the plants are more mature. But then you gotta, figure out, well, do you want more forage so they can be out there longer, or do you want them to gain more weight for a shorter time period? So here's what that looked like. When I say soil is covered at the end of grazing, that's been the hardest part for me with all this, is getting the cattle off the land early enough. If you keep them out there, they will eat until there's nothing left but dirt, and then they'll start eating the dirt if they have to. So looking back now, I can say that, yeah, I should have taken them off earlier and left more residue out there. But so here's the calves I was grazing that year, 20 steers, beginning to weigh 790 pounds. I grazed them for 43 days, and they averaged a daily gain at almost 2.2 pounds per day. And then I had clipped a sample of the cover crop and tested it for a feed analysis. And everybody likes to know what was the protein, 11.2%, and then relative feed value, 163. If you're not familiar with relative feed value, alfalfa in the pre-bud stage would have a relative feed value of like 164. So very high quality forage that late in the fall. Any quick questions before I keep moving on here? Okay, we'll move on to the 2014 cover crop. So this was on the same field we just looked at. I seeded radish, dangrass, and sun hemp. I'd never heard of sun hemp before. The salesman talked me into it, imagine that. And so I planted it. And if you're in Georgia, it would work great, not so much in North Dakota. So you don't really need to remember what sun hemp was, but for you down here, it might work really well, actually. So this was seeded July 6th, and raised that in the fall again. So there's brother-in-law doing some custom seeding for me, and then here's what it looked like in July. There's my one sun hemp plant, or two sun hemp plants I actually got to grow there. And where did the cows go? So here's the start of grazing. So those are 500-600 weight calves out there, and turned them into the field and been seen for about 4 or 5 days. But they were still in there, and that was good to know. So they were pretty happy. I guess it's kind of a common theme here. I was still in college, so I wasn't home to manage things as closely as I would have liked to, but so those are the radishes that had bolted and are flowering there. So again, if I would have started grazing earlier, it would have been higher quality for the calves out there. So it looks like a mess when the cows are out there, but that's really what you want to see. They're trampling, tearing, tugging those plants, so they're releasing those root exudates into the soil. And then grazing November 16th, nice little snowfall on top too. So I tracked the daily gain on these calves again, so there's 88 calves out there, and they both average about 1.5 pounds per day weight gain. And there you notice the relative feed value of 121 was lower, and you saw the radishes bolted and plants more mature, that's why it's lower. But the big thing for me was it produced 2.75 tons of dry matter per acre. And when you got 88 head and you can leave them out there for almost 50 days in the fall and not have to feed them every day, that's a win-win in my book. And then I did track their gain across the summer, and I measured that they gain less than 1 pound per day, so that cover crop still doubled their weight gain. So it worked out economically too as well. So there's just a closer look at that feed test there. And this had 9.7% protein. The following year, 2015, I started planting full season cover crops. At that time, the commodity prices had dropped. I was like, well, if I know I'm not gonna make any money planting wheat, why plant wheat? So I planted a full season cover crop instead. And I guess, it's not a one recipe card fits for everybody, so I select everything for a reason. That's in my cover crop mixes. So turnips were in there because they don't bolt as quick as radishes do. I tried sugar beets because they were supposed to be saline tolerant, but they do not compete very well when they're grown in a mix like that. Forage barley because They don't have awns on the heads, so they don't get stuck in a cow's throat. Forage peas to fix nitrogen, and then millet is for the biomass. So there's always a reason for what you put out there. Let's look at the growth. Close up of the barley head. I look at this picture and now it's like, well, that's when I should have started grazing right there. But then I waited another 2 weeks because I was in Iowa and started grazing a little bit later. So I put my cover crop choppers to work at 135 head on this 40 acres and grazed it for 24 days. And then I actually went and seeded another crop into that residue. So the cows, you know, this was like a 2-acre patch here, so put 135 head on 2 acres. By some definitions, you could say that's mob grazing. The only thing standing there you see are a few marsh shelter plants. I had to go and clip down. So, but you know, if I would have started grazing earlier, it would have been more vegetative and it would have gotten eaten. So that's how to get around that problem. And so now I'm at home, returning to the farm. This is the herd I was custom grazing this summer. And so this is native pasture intensive grazing. So when I'm bringing somebody else's cows to my place, I always say they have to go in a training pen for electric fences. If they haven't been around an electric fence before, they don't know what one wire is and they will walk right through it. So here's a training pen that they were in for one day. You see what the ground cover looks like there, and then you go back the following day. So they're all laying down, they're all content, but you see all the grass is either eaten or trampled, which is what you want. And this is the really interesting part that it was for me, so I'll click one more slide. Note this was May 29th. So here's August 5th. That looks like it should be May 29th there. So this was regrowth. This was probably on, you know, we got a total of 11 inches of precipitation all year. So it was dry and we were able to get this much production too as well. So if I go back, May 29th, those cows, they went from this field out to a spring grazing and winter ride. So this was some nice forage to graze in the spring. You know, rye will be your early grazing forage. Trail daily will be better quality a little bit later. But obviously that far north, I want to start grazing as early as I can. Then I went and planted a forage mix behind that rye crop. And that far north with the snow we have to have a backup plan. So I ended up making hay. So here I was you know, cutting the cover crop mix for the hay. And then that cover crop mix, if you plant the right plants and cut it at the right time, it will regrow. So this is what I called my climbing cow chow. It's down there on the bottom of that bale. Tough to see on the picture, but that was hairy vetch that was in the mix. So I got nice regrowth from that. And so if possible, I'm going to leave these bales out in the field and just graze them right where they're at instead of hauling all your nutrients into your yard, having the cows eat them, and then hauling them back out, which just reduces efficiency all the way around. So this is a system I think there's a lot of potential for. And here was the feed test on these bales I made. So this was the highest protein I had seen just due to the more diversity I had in the mix and the earlier time that I cut it. So 12.5% protein, relative feed value 123, and the RFQ, which takes into account the digestibility, was even higher. So that's nice feed there. So that herd that I custom graze with, I start grazing on the cover crops, and like Junie does, grazes them then on native pasture for June and July, and the grass dries up and bring them back to cover crops. So this was a kind of a pollinator mix I tried this year, and it was grazing in late October when the grass would usually be grown, and that worked out really good. So if you're thinking about grazing cattle, there's a trend in the beef industry right now that everybody has to have a 16 or 1800 pound cow and have the biggest calf that you can't pay £5 when you sell a calf. But if your cow eats 1 1/4, 1 1/3 times of a smaller cow that weans a 10 pound, or you know, a calf that's 10 pounds less, the smaller cow is going to be more efficient every time. So the cow-calf pairs you see here, I bought this spring. They came from a ranch that doesn't use any antibiotics or hormones. The animals don't get foraged for parasites or anything like that. It's closed herd. And these cows, when I bought them, they had the calf alongside them, they weighed 900 pounds. That's a pretty small cow, so maybe when they're fully grown, they'll be 11 to 1,200 pound cow. The calves look like they're 4 to 5 week calves, which were born in May. So it was kind of interesting because the cows I was custom grazing were 16 to 1800 pound cows, and my cows were half the size, and they have the same size calves. So you tell me which one makes more sense. So it's been pretty interesting just to track that. Also, you notice just the shape of the cow in general. She's deeper bodied and then more compact. So that's kind of the trend in the beef industry has been to have a cow that stands taller than I am and has a long wingspan than I do. So just a little different there. And obviously creating less work for yourself. Here's my cattle pen for this coming spring. So this is cereal rye that was seeded into pea stubble. If you're wondering, that's not snow, that white stuff, that's cattail fuzz that was blowing around this fall. There's lots of water in cattails and just crazy with the cattail fuzz. So this rye wasn't seeded until October 2nd. I just got behind. That field was combined in August. That's when it should have been planted earlier than that. But either way, it's in the ground and it'll provide nice cover. Here's one of my favorite acronyms, soil health improvement tools. So we talked about the animal impact and what that does to stimulate the microbial activity in the ground. And I'm starting to see it, especially on this third year in the transition to no-till. So there you see all the earthworm castings on top of the soil, all the fungi, mycorrhizal fungi, everything going on below ground. You can see the earthworm channels there in the soil profile. It's actually mixing the clay into the topsoil, which you don't really want, but they're also bringing topsoil down at the same time, so it goes full circle. This was interesting too. This was this spring when I was grazing that winter rye in the spring. This is one shovelful, a just random spot. Dug it up and I counted 8 earthworms in that, so I thought that was pretty incredible. And that's only what you can see. So if earthworms have increased that much, think everything else down there too. And I have been able to track some of the soil data out in these fields. So this is looking specifically at soil organic matter. So this is conventional soil test that any farmer would do, 0 to 6 inch, 6 to 24 inch. So the numbers, they can be hard to follow sometime, but I think you can kind of see a trend line. So if you look from 2014 to 2017, almost every field up there has gone up by 0.3%. That's 0.1% per year. The guys that have been no-tilling for the last 40 years are saying they can have a 0.5% increase in a year. So obviously there's improvement that I can make, but we're still building soil, so on the right track. And it's kind of funny, I went to college to be an agronomist. I think I should have went to be an ecologist instead. But it's as we've said all day, it's more about managing systems rather than a simple one-track crop to be grown. So like they say, if you build it, you'll come. With the pollinator plants out there, beneficial insects showed up. And also here's a duck nest out in my rye field. So, and still there once the cows got grazing, so they can work together. So it all sounds great, and there's always considerations. Everybody, has these worries. I've got this in mind. I'm going to talk about a few of them. If you have questions about the rest, we can go through that. Everybody wants to know, well, I've got cropland and I want to run my cows on it. How can we get a fence around it? So this is the fencing rig I came up with. I use all poly-electric wire, just one wire. So it's pretty simple. I made stepping posts out of rebar, put a rack on the front of my four-wheeler, pull a trailer where I can keep more posts. So I can put a fence around 80 acres in about 4 hours. When I have to pick it up, it picks up quicker than it gets put out. So I guess I don't really look as fencing as a big issue. I guess it's still working, it still has to be done. But you can spend 4 hours scrolling through Facebook, so I don't think it's that big a deal. And then this was a really big time saver for me. I've got pastures. I guess I don't live on the farm I operate. I live in town, so I got to drive out to the farm, and then I got to drive an additional 10 to 20 miles to check my animals. So this fence alarm, what this does, it's a solar powered machine. You hook the one wire to your electric fence, and you put one in the ground, and it sends your phone a text message if your fence shorts out. So when I'm using one wire poly wire, and for some reason gear runs through it and fence shorts out, or the wire's non-existent, instead of going out there a day or two later and having the neighbor call you and say, "Oh, your cows are in my yard," I'll know within 2 minutes, if that fence is shorted out, whatever. So that saved me a lot of time, just driving around checking cows this summer. And also, one time we had a storm and a tree blew on the fence and shorted it out. So just little things like that. Also, the big issue is water. I don't have an issue about having water, it's accessing the water. So if I have a quarter of land and 80 acres are tillable and 80 acres are slough and cattails, that's pretty common, but cows can't really walk in 200 feet into the cattails to get a drink. It's not good for them, and obviously water quality is decreasing at the same time. So I guess I ended up having an excavator come in and dig channels like this so I can pump out of them. So I can pump it into the tank, which is on the float, so the cows come drink and it just refills by itself. So depending on how many animals you have, you just fill the tank, every day or every 3 days or as needed. And then there's some spots too, I do end up hauling water. So, that's the last alternative. So there's a lot of different ways that you can run pipeline underground, a lot of different ways to do it, but this seems to be some of the simplest and quickest, especially if you're renting all the land like I am and you don't know how many years you're going to have that. So these are just kind of the recommendations I have if you're getting started with cover crops. You can plant one brassica, one legume, cover crop mix. I would say that's at a minimum. The more you have, the better it gets. If you're trying to have nitrogen fixation, I think your mix should be at least 50% legumes. And just like a soybean crop or anything, make sure you inoculate them so that bacteria is in the soil. And obviously radish and turnip are frost tolerant, so it usually snows and covers them up before they die. Because usually that first snow we get is the coldest we are. And as you saw earlier, when I just planted radishes and turnips into wheat stubble, and now I have up here, don't plant just radish and turnip alone. They're finding that if you just plant radish and turnip, there's some soluble phosphorus out there in the spring when the snow melts, and that is going to leave your field very quickly. So you should have a grass or something else in there to soak it up with the radish and turnip as it goes decay and release the nutrients. So the cattle will acclimate to any cover crop they're going to eat. Everybody says, "Oh, cover crop's too rich, they're going to bloat, they're going to this, they're going to that." I haven't had any issues, I guess. If there's diversity out there, there's not going to be a problem. That goes for like Sudan grass when it freezes, has prussic acid. If it's only half of the mix, I don't worry about it. And cows will kind of regulate themselves too. They know what they can and cannot eat most of the time. If you graze about 45 to 50 days after planting, that seems to be the best quality for gaining weight on those calves. I found grazing calves to be the most profitable versus if you're running your cow-calf herd over that. But if you're planting a cover crop after a cash crop, and the cash crop already pays for the land, well, then it's profitable both ways. This is in North Dakota. If you plant after August 15th, your cover crop won't have enough growth to go to seed. So, kind of in conclusion, I've learned that start grazing earlier than later. Leave more residue than you think you should, because either way it's not going to waste. Cut back recommended seeding rates from salespeople. I don't know how many are in here, but usually I've had instances where I just cut what they recommend in half and have plenty to stand. Their $35 an acre mix turns into 15 or 20, and it's more economical that way. You can add more animal impact. Gabe Brown in North Dakota, he's done a lot of work with intensive grazing or mob grazing. I had good intentions when I started out this spring. I was like, well, I'm going to divide into 4-acre paddocks and move my cows every 2 days. I did that for the first week and realized I had no time to do this. So it didn't quite work out as good as it should. But that's where, you know, once you switch to the systems approach, and bigger always is better. So, you know, I actually think that if I cut back on some of the cattle I'm running and do a better job doing it, I'll be better off in the long run. And obviously, you should type this anywhere you can. So in summary, we are the decision makers. It's not about perfection, it's about direction. So just getting cover crop out there is moving in the right way. No matter what I say, you don't have to believe that. You don't have to believe what I do, but believe in why I'm doing it and why we should do it. Treat problems rather than symptoms. So I started off by showing that the picture of that dust cloud this spring. That is the problem, and just doing one of the soil or doing one of the 3 things that David talked about this morning. As I said before, it's not like eating a square meal each day. So if you do one without the others, that system will be broken. And this kind of puts it in perspective. You got to keep in mind what's going on below ground. Obviously, no piece of steel can benefit the soil like the roots of a good cover crop.